What's up, everybody? Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. We're going to bring Phil Perry, who's our boots on the ground in Las Vegas, in just 1 minute. But here's something that is elemental to our jobs. We got into this because, A, we really like sports, but B, we like to tell people what we're seeing and be kind of know-it-alls. So when we see something and tell you about it, but you haven't seen it yet, sometimes we want to get confirmation that what we saw is actually what's happening so that when it gets out there in front of you, you can see the same thing. With that in mind, there's an interesting dance that goes on here. While it's important that you saw on Friday night some of the travails and struggles of the Patriots offense, it is distressing for somebody who covers the team for a living, myself and Phil alike, to see them flounder this much. We don't want to be this right, Phil. This was a jarring performance in the final preseason game by the New England Patriots, and they left their starters out there until they got something right, and they barely did. Anything you can hang your hat on, big fella?
Honestly, from what we saw on the field, no.
Okay.
Now, I will come back to maybe two small nuggets that were signs of good things to come, but I think the thing that you can hang your hat on in general from tonight is the quarterback's post-game press conference, where he didn't try to sugarcoat anything. He acknowledged he got frustrated and that he wants to do a better job keeping his frustrations in check, because I think he understands, as I wrote earlier today, he really is an emotional beacon for this team, good and bad. It's just the nature of the job and the nature of where this team is at leadership-wise, that they need him to be that. But I think he also understood his shortcomings from an execution perspective. There were moments out there where he started scrambling around where he really didn't need to. Now, is that his fault? I think you could argue no, because his offensive line has given him no reason to be confident in them whatsoever based on practices or preseason games thus far this summer. And so it does come back to that, but he put it on his shoulders. And still, Tom, he also, I thought, gave us a resolute kind of message, which is, we're going to figure this out. We're going to figure this out. I know it's going to happen. It didn't happen tonight. We're going to work on the corrections, and we'll move on from there. We're still climbing the mountain, is how he put it. So that, to me, is the takeaway, is that the frustration we saw from him during the game didn't spill over after the fact, and I think what he said after, honestly, is a sign of his growth as a leader.
And I think that we can both agree how desperately sad that is, that after 3 preseason games and the team having been in training camp since July 28th, that the most positive thing that we will see as the Patriots burrow into their spider hole for the next 16 days is that at least Mac Jones is stiff upper lipping it still in the face of unbelievable self-caused adversity by the New England Patriots. I mean, that's astounding. And when we look at this, let's go quick to the black box of the Patriots offensive performance. Boom, first drive, nice little in-cut slant to Devontae Parker. You pick up 8 yards, 2nd and 2 should be easy to pick up that next 2 yards. Ramondre Stevenson on a stretch play, a 4-yard loss. Still never saw a replay. Anybody, we'll get to that in a second. I want to find out who was at fault there. And then on the third down, 3rd and 8, Mac Jones was looking, I believe it was Devontae Parker. Didn't really have the window because of an oncoming rusher. Isaiah Wynn seemed to have leverage on him, but Mac scrambled or moved away from the leverage and ended up having to take a sack. More on Mac than Isaiah Wynn. Punt. Second drive, also not good. Ends with a pick. Mac threw it into a team meeting again when he moved out and slid right and then set his feet, and it seemed as if his internal clock said, well, time to let it go, and threw it in the direction of Kendrick Bourne, and several people could have picked it off. So Mac, part of the problem on both of those. But Phil, what were you seeing? And there was a hold in there as well before the pick. So it's chicken or the egg. Offensive line, play call, scheme, fundamentals, technique. Mac, where does it begin after this game and the snippet we saw?
I still feel as though the run game has just been so bad that it makes it hard for anything else to function. And so when the first team offense is out there, we can get into the passing offense and Mac Jones. And again, he acknowledged he did not do enough and play well enough. But the run game stuff, because we just haven't seen it work all summer, Tom. Specifically, the wide zone stretch run plays that have not worked really all summer. And the few that have, I can remember them in my mind's eye because you could hear Matt Patricia and others cheering loudly when they finally hit one. It just, they have been so few and far between. They ran 3 of those and they gained negative 12 yards on those 3 plays today. That includes a 10-yard loss on a holding penalty by Micah Wenu. But 3 plays minus 12, that's about as bad as it gets.
Think about this. You got the greatest coach in NFL history who pivoted to this scheme, yet from April to August, what's representative is minus 12 on 3 carries. And I guess that's what's mind-boggling. You mentioned that the stretch run plays that the Patriots have had work in practice, we remember. From the 3 preseason games, honest to God, there was a Damian Harris run in practice on a stretch that we both talked about for 2 days. From this preseason, there was a 3rd and 5 completion to Nelson Aguilar and a downfield completion to Nelson Aguilar, a little flare pass to Ty Montgomery and a touchdown run by Ty Montgomery that come easily to mind because there's so few plays that you can really draw on from the summer to say, good shit there. Now we got it. And that's what the Patriots are doing. It's like, if you stand there taking half-court shots and you make a couple, you don't say, wow, I'm getting hot from here.
Tom, I wrote about this a little bit for NBCSportsBoston.com when I wrote about all the issues that have been facing the offensive line this summer and all the problems they've been having with communication and personnel changes and language changes. What was funny about tonight, what was interesting about tonight, is that on those wide zone runs, you just had missed assignments, plain and simple. And it might just be one guy, but that's all it takes for that play to get blown up. And in that story, I mentioned having spoken to people who know Bill Belichick really well. One thing he will not stand for are negative runs. He's got no patience for them. They are death for Bill Belichick. And so does he look at this game here tonight, knowing that, even his buddy, Mike Shanahan, he went on the record with Sports Illustrated, I think the story was last year, saying, you have to buy in this scheme. If you want to run it, it has to become your life. You have to take a holistic approach to making this thing work. Everybody has to be on board, and you have to give it time. That's what Mike Shanahan has said. But if Bill Belichick thinks negative runs are death, and they're picking up negative 12 yards on 3 wide zone runs tonight, does he look at it and say, we tried, but we just can't have it? Because, Tom, and this gets back to when I said off the top, there are a couple small little glimmers of maybe some small nugget of hope. The run plays that worked well for them tonight, one was a power run with a pulling guard. Look familiar?
Yep.
The other was toss crack. Ramondre Stevenson, 13 yards, following Big Trent Brown out in space, the same way James White did to win Super Bowl 51. So,
do you remember this happened last year? Same thing happened last year. They spent the first two or three weeks they tried to run wide, and they couldn't do it. And this is with Shaq May, and then they started running the stuff, behind the center and guard. They were trying at times. It wasn't stretch plays necessarily, although maybe it was, and Dummy here couldn't really even tell. But they had difficulty running outside last year in the early portion of the season, and they said, "Screw that, forget it, back to the middle." It's interesting to see that happen, that they might have to toggle back to what they were doing, which to me would be an unbelievable admission of, we just spent a shit ton of time on something and it didn't work. We wasted your time. We caused you great frustration. We caused great adversity. We lost time preparing for the season in something that didn't work. So are they still at a juncture of in for a dime, in for a dollar, we're going to make this thing work? Or they start saying, shit, we got a game, one that counts in about 15 minutes here. We got to try and figure out what we're going to do. Do they have to have a come to Jesus meeting between the offensive brain trust, which is, I don't know who the offensive brain trust is anymore, Phil. It's Bill and Mac Jones, I guess. Is it?
Matt Patricia still has to be in there.
I
Joe
know, but
Judge,
it's like who's the big offensive brain? I mean, I should defer to Matt and say, look, he knows what he's doing. He can call an offense. He understands it. He gets the concept. They get the concepts. It's not rocket science, and he's a rocket scientist.
but Tom, I think it is fair for you to wonder if it's going to work. I mean, I'm still talking to league people. This started back at the combine, talking to people across football, asking them how they felt about the Patriots and their offensive coaching staff situation. Flabbergasted was the word I used back then at the combine. To this day, as recently as today, again, talking to people in the league, and they just have no faith that this will work. Maybe it will. We both think Matt Patricia is a smart guy. We know Bill Belichick's a smart guy. I am confident enough in Mac Jones and Bill Belichick that I would say, as bad as it's been this summer, this still might work. There are things that, for instance, Tom, it's been brought up to me, there are things that they can't really do in practice to try to hone these kinds of runs that they're trying to do. Like, you can't cut on the backside in practice, right? You're not blocking below the waist,
right,
on the back sides of these runs in practice. And that's a big part of that system. So maybe they need, the live reps they got tonight, they need some, and it may take a month, may take 2 in the regular season until they start to look good with this thing. The other thing that they don't really do in the preseason is just little game plan things that's been brought to my attention. And I think I knew that before the last week or so. But, hey, this nose tackle is when he's shaded this way, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We saw this on film, and that's how we're going to respond. They don't really do that right now.
Right.
And those are the little tweaks that maybe can turn a 4-yard loss into a 5-yard gain on a run play like that. So maybe those things turn come the regular season. I think it's just hard for us to say, well, it's going to work. Don't worry about it. And I think it's hard for them to look at what they've put on tape, what they've done on the field, and say, hey, we feel good about these plays. I don't know how they could.
That's the interesting thing, is if we're going to end up eating our words on this, and we have eaten our words, dined on them time and again during Bill Belichick's tenure, second guesses, there's been other second guesses that we've made that they were worth second guessing. But if we're going to eat our words and the New England Patriots are going to be a prolific offense in week 1 against the Miami Dolphins, they are not going to do what they did tonight. They're not going to succeed running the stretch offense, wide zone runs in week 1. They're not going to put up 24 points against the Miami Dolphins. I promise you that. If they score more than 20 points against the Dolphins, it will be by and large because they went spread. They let Mac Jones make quick decisions and try and take advantage of aerial mismatches. It's not going to come because the Patriots ran it great with wide zone. Period. We've seen enough. Maybe it'll come by week 8, but it ain't coming against Miami. They can win the game. I would say that they should definitely be the underdog, however. But if they do win the game, it won't be because they're doing what we've watched for the last 4 weeks. It'll be because they veered. Now, we can end up saying, well, that was the plan all along. Bill had it all sussed out. He's been dodging and weaving and playing peekaboo the entire summer, and you guys bit he's a genius. And maybe. But my guess is if they come out in the opener and put up a representative offensive effort, it'll be because they're doing something that looks nothing like what they've been trying to do. Fair or unfair?
It's so hard for me to say. And I asked Bill Belichick at the end of his press conference tonight, hey, you love the word dependability, right? And usually when he uses it, he's talking about players, not plays. But I asked him, do you have plays that you feel are dependable plays for your offense right now? Because to me, Tom, it looks like those gap runs, power runs behind pulling Mike Owenu, toss crack, the inside zone or the duo downhill between the tackles kinds of runs. It looks like those work just fine. And I would feel good about those if I'm Bill Belichick. And those would be my dependable plays. Those would be my go-tos. And I'm not expecting him to give us the weekly game plan in a press conference like this and tell us exactly what he likes and what he doesn't. But his answer was essentially, well, there's certain plays that work against certain teams and other plays that don't work against other teams. And so he's going to look at this Miami Dolphins team, and is he going to say, well, our identity now is to be a wide zone offense? I don't think so. I think he's going to look at it and say, we could stress him here. This end stinks, or that tackle can't stop this. And they'll try to hammer that. So that's just what makes this hard to pin down, is as we are going through covering a scheme change and a new offense, which it is, the Patriots offense is always whatever Bill Belichick wants it to be in a given week. It's almost as if their identity is that they don't have an identity.
And that's what's interesting. If they're trying to make the offense simpler and more user-friendly, if you continue to have a morphing and changing offense the way they've always done, isn't it harder to master? See, I thought that they were trying to pivot from that and make it more user-friendly.
I thought so too. And they are. They're trying to create less thinking. They're trying to, we're going to, not that they're going to ever be a we run what we run type of team, but when we call this, everyone knows their job when they get to the line of scrimmage. We're going to play fast. We're going to make decisions quickly. Everyone's going to be on the same page. And that's what's going to make us most efficient. We just haven't seen it. We just haven't seen it work yet, Tom. And we've been through a month of training camp.
When you look at the level of commitment they've made too, I mean, just let Jakob Johnson go and say, we ain't using fullbacks anymore, bro. Sorry. The draft decisions, the Cole Strange, the Shaq Mason dealing, it all informs what they're trying to do. But
can I ask you something?
Yes, sir. Please do.
This is pivoting a little bit. So tell me if you want to talk about something different. But do you worry about the quarterback getting frustrated?
That's exactly where I wanted to go, bud. Yeah,
because
after
the third series, he comes back to the bench, picks up his tablet, spikes it behind the bench. After the fourth series, he's pacing on the sidelines. He's ripping off his play calling wristband. He's throwing it on the ground before somebody picks it up and gives it back to him. He's clearly steamed. And being who he is now for this team, being the leader that he is now for this team, I wonder if anybody looks at that and says, Mac, we can't have it. He might think it himself. I just find it to be not alarming, but I think it's telling. I just think this has been a frustrating summer. And I don't think what we saw tonight was all about just tonight. I think it was frustration that probably has built up over some time. That's a guess.
And here's the thing. Are we alarmed that Mac is unable to bottle his outward emotion and shows the frustration? Or are we alarmed that a second-year quarterback who had such a positive first year has been put in a position where he's perpetually pissed off and then having to go and talk about his resoluteness in the face of so much adversity that is self-inflicted by decisions made to pivot on an offense, self-inflicted by not having a successor in place for Josh McDaniels, self-inflicted by uprooting a very talented and useful right guard, self-inflicted by flipping your right tackle and left tackle so that the left tackle might be pissed off that he's not making left tackle money and the right tackle's pissed off that he's going to be playing right tackle. And that's as he goes into free agency. Pissed off because Justin Herron ain't so hot. I mean, all of these things are self-inflicted. So are you empathetic to Mac Jones' frustration? Or do you say, buddy, it's just starting, you better stiff upper lip it?
I think because of the uniqueness of the coaching staff situation here, Tom, I side with the player in this situation, especially when you look at where we are right now and who was on the opposite sideline tonight. And the guy who taught Mac Jones most of what he knew in pro football through his first season when he makes a Pro Bowl is sitting there watching Mac Jones grind away, fight through it, get pissed off on the sidelines when it doesn't go his way. Mac Jones knows that guy is right there. Mm-hmm. And he should be right here. Or at least I wish he was right here. helping me through this. And now I wonder if he feels like he's flailing away in an ocean of football information and trying to figure out how to make this thing right. Because again, the coaching staff, as we've pointed out many times, I think they're as reliant on him as he is on them, if not more so.
And he looks across the field and sees his former backup running the offense that got him to a Pro Bowl as a rookie, kind of work like clockwork, surrounded by 2s and 3s offensively. I mean, it's an excellent point to look at the totality of the picture. You got a Pro Bowl quarterback in Mac Jones, floundering in an offense that, paddling around in scuba fins on the sidelines trying to run. And on the other side, it's a guy the Patriots were happy to part with, and Jarrett Stidham, zipping up and down the sidelines in track shoes. Field, sidelines, whatever. You get the point. Too many metaphors again. It's late.
Wouldn't you be hot?
Oh, I'd be hot. I would say, why did we do this? Look, I know that Josh had to leave for a better job, but shit, didn't we know he was a pretty good candidate to take a job someplace else? Didn't we have a plan? And if we didn't have a plan to succeed him, why are we going to pivot to something so sophisticated and foreign to us with not enough coaches to execute it? That to me is, I don't know if Bill Belichick is cavalier about the ease with which the Patriots will get to 7, 8, or 9 wins. I don't know if he overestimated his team. I don't know exactly why. There has to be benefit to it. The guy's forgotten more football in a night's sleep than we'll ever know. He has to see some kind of a vision for how good it'll be down the road. But right now, after 3 preseason games and a month of football, we're not seeing light at the end of the tunnel. The only light we see could be a train coming right at us. Sorry.
Do you think Bill Belichick worries about his players exhibiting patience? I asked him about that as well tonight. There wasn't a whole lot of Boston media at the press conference post game. There was Nicole Yang and Jim McBride and Evan Lazar from Patriots.com. Nicole and Jim, obviously, from the Globe. Dan Roach, Steve Burton, Scott Zolak from WBZ. And that was it. And so I asked him about frustration. Is it okay in his mind for players to get frustrated this time of year? It's just the preseason, right? This doesn't matter. You're trying to learn. You're trying to figure things out. So I wondered if he was cool with that or if he would preach patience to guys. And maybe it differs depending on the year. He really didn't give much of an answer. He said, I'm sure everybody has their own emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he would love for players to be patient because I think Tom, if you're Bill Belichick or Matt Patricia or Joe Judge, I don't think there's any way you could look at how the summer has gone and how some of the players have behaved in certain instances, whether it's Kendrick Bourne or Trent Brown or Isaiah Wynn or anybody else, and wonder, do we have everybody on board? Is everybody in lockstep?
You could throw Damian Harris in there too. We've seen Damian Harris lose his mind during practice, mildly, not lose it entirely, but frustration levels. I mean, David Andrews, frustration level. It's hard to find the guy on the Patriots offense who's probably saying, it's going pretty good for me. Maybe
it's all
going to
Jacoby Myers. It's all going to be okay, guys.
Parker. I mean, Jonnu Smith, did he see a ball this preseason?
I don't think he did tonight.
Hank Henry, had a catch. I don't know why I call him Hank, but
don't you wish, if you're Bill Belichick, I think you're wishing somebody there is saying, guys, it's going to be okay. And Mac Jones, I think, does that at the podium, and maybe he does it behind the scenes too. I think David Andrews is probably the same way. But I think you do have to be at least cognizant of player buy-in. And we've talked about that at length before. Bill Belichick, we know, pays attention to that. I think that's going to be a continuous pursuit for him really all year until they find some rhythm. They get some positive momentum going. It's been hard for them to generate a good, strong, call it week of practice and a preseason game, 3-4 practices in a row. It just hasn't been there.
Does he do it with the carrot or the stick? In 2000, when Bill Belichick started here, he imported guys like Anthony Pleasant, and it's too long ago for me to go through the whole list, and it's too early in the morning. But he had coaches like Weiss and Cornell and a GM like Scott Pioli. Doesn't have a GM really right now. Who is a GM?
Matt Groh.
Okay, Matt Groh. So the point remains, Matt Groh, Scott Pioli. There's no comparison, generally speaking. Maybe Matt will get there. But who are the people who help these players understand the culture, and that at some point Bill is going to have to say, all right, you know what? When I say jump, you say how high. I don't care how little you like it. Andy Katzenmoyer wandered in late to the first team meeting in 2000. Bill Belichick told him to get the bleep out of there. I don't know if guys are wandering in late right now with Devin McCourty, Matt Slater, Damian Harris, David Andrews, Mac Jones, whoever, ready to jump ugly on him. But are they jumping ugly on him? And we keep talking about Bill preaching patience and guys being frustrated. At some point, Bill's going to say, hey, I don't give a shit if you're frustrated. This is what we're doing, and I'm not going to continue to walk behind you and hold you a box of Kleenex under your nose and say, just blow. It's going to be okay. Can he do that in 2022? Does he have enough people on board with him to say he's got it? When all the players know that Matt Patricia's never been an offensive coordinator, that Joe Judge has never been a quarterback's coach, that both of those guys had very difficult tenures at their last head coaching jobs, that their hard evidence on the field is that the shit isn't working, that these morons in the media on their 2 to 6 talk shows and their early editions and their quick slants and their Next Pats podcasts are continually pointing out that this isn't working. And you know what? They're probably right. So when Bill says, shut up and do what I tell you to do, which I don't think he's doing yet because he's probably treading lightly as he asks these guys to do that, how do they respond?
I don't think he's doing that either consistently, at least right now. I think he did do it to Trent Brown during the Panthers week of practice. I know essentially he did that to Trent Brown, calling out his effort. But that was one specific case for a guy who has shown in the past that he does respond to hard coaching. So I get that. But I think, Tom, we've seen just the opposite. I mean, how many compliments does Bill Belichick have to throw around over the course of a summer? This might just be sports science related, but I do still wonder about just the general tenor of practice and how hard these workouts have been and how many, weekends off they've had and things like that. I think he's trying to give the team what it needs right now, and what it needs is a boost. It needs confidence. It needs compliments. It needs somebody telling them that they're doing a good job, because it's not always easy to see.
It's so far.
And that, to me, again, speaks to the fact that he is paying attention to buy-in and that he cares about it, because he doesn't want to lose these guys. He probably knows the stuff they're doing, the changes they're making is going to take time. And until it takes, he needs everybody to stay on the ship. And so I think he's doing whatever he can, including tonight, Tom, in this post-game presser. He was not all that unpleasant. He was smiling. He told us, and I don't know if I've ever heard him say this, we really didn't do anything well enough tonight. And I'm paraphrasing now, but he said, we really didn't do anything well enough tonight. Maybe we left it all on the practice field. As if to say, like a baseball manager saying, hey, I guess we ran out of hits in the first inning tonight. We strung together 7, but we didn't get any the rest of the way. Them's the breaks. I don't know if I've ever heard him refer back, especially to a practice, but refer back to a practice in that way. We don't hear him often talk about yesterday. It's always what's next.
And
the
practice, if you want to talk about practices, wasn't Tuesday a complete, absolute abhorrent mess? And then Wednesday was good.
That's how, I saw about 80% of Tuesday's practice as rough. And I think players pretty much confirmed this on Wednesday when they came back to the tent to talk to us and say, wow, that was a much better practice than yesterday. We needed that, essentially, is kind of how it came back to us. So for him to make that kind of callback was unusual to me, and it just tells you how he's trying to handle this team now, I think, with kid gloves in some ways, to make sure everybody is rowing in the right direction.
Well, Phil, great work out there all week long in Las Vegas. Really appreciate you. I know that all Perrys want you home. I want you home. Okay. I missed you, and I need you back here.
Miss you guys.
ASAP.
Miss you guys too.
We'll talk Ty Montgomery. We'll talk roster.
Weekend.
We'll talk all that stuff on Tuesday. We got a lot to get to, but it's been 34 minutes of just, I don't know what it's not good, Phil.
What's unfortunate is this is usually a game, Tom, where you can at least look at some of the bubble guys on the roster and say, hey, we got 80 yards rushing on 10 carries from player X.
Yep.
We didn't really have that. You had JJ Taylor recover a fumble. That was the highlight of the game. And maybe he gets a roster spot now with Ty Montgomery being injured, but it was a tough game in that regard. Not a whole lot of positives. Well, I appreciate your efforts out there, and I think you've done a terrific job. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'm excited to come home. We're going to put a cork in this. Skull Crusher, thanks for staying up late. It's 1:04 on the East Coast right now, and I appreciate everybody's patience. It'll get better, or it'll get worse. Either way, we'll be there for the whole thing.